Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kelsey Doom. I'm the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce President and CEO, and I'm the staff liaison for our Public Affairs Committee of the Brookings Area Chamber of Commerce, which is the committee that hosts these forums through session. So this is our second and last coffee of this session. So thank you all for being here. We have just our District 7 legislators this morning, and Andy Foberg here is our moderator. We'll let the candidates or the legislators introduce themselves. I do want to give a shout out to our coffee sponsor, Cool Beans, and our legislative sponsor, Brookings Economic Development Corporation. And also put a bug in your ear, the Chamber's annual celebration. It's our annual meeting, Taste of Brookings. It's taking place on April 6th. Tickets are available as of yesterday, so you can go online and buy those. It's a great event in Club 71 with lots of food vendors and things like that. So lovely event. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Andy to get us going.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Just one reminder, there's a table over there if you have a question. For those of you who have been here when I've been doing this before, if you do not submit a question, you will find out what I'm interested in this legislative session. So encourage you to submit some questions because we've got the folks who can answer them here today. And with that, I will turn it over to you folks. And Senator Reed, we will start with you for introductions.
Well, good morning. And since we're waiting for questions, I think we can kind of go over some of the things that are going on when it comes to appropriations and some of the other issues that we have going on since we don't have an appropriator anymore. Get closer to the mic is what Andy's saying. So first of all, Tim Reed, I'm in my 7th year here in the legislature. I just moved over to the Senate this year. I serve on Health and Human Services, Education, and I chair local government. First thing I'll say about the session is it's gone very smooth. The two chambers are really getting along well. That helps because then the legislature has a little more power than the governor. And so you've seen some of the governor's bills actually get defeated this year. And, you know, that the priorities of the legislature are carrying the day a little bit more. All the bills are moving through very well. That's something else that's been talked about. All of the committees, there's not a committee that's just so overloaded where they're going to be going late into the evening. We got through crossover day. I don't know, when did the House get done? Was it 6:30, 5:30? Usually both chambers are there into the evening. That went very well. So the session itself is going very smooth. I think the biggest thing for the next 2 weeks that we're going to be dealing with is the budget. You know, and really we have two different bills that we have to complete for the budget. One is called the special appropriations. And that's what we do with the leftover money that we have from the current fiscal year that we're in. And then we'll also be talking about what is called the G bill, which is the general budget. As far as the special appropriations, some of the things that have been completed that have actually passed through is $6 million to help with the DEX construction. That's the Huron. It's for the state fairgrounds, and it's the cattle barn that had burnt down. They needed replacing. Of course, with inflation, they had some cost overruns, so $6 million there. There's also several other buildings and such projects that were approved last year, and they added money for the inflationary increases. Some other interesting ones that are still to be discussed, and I actually think this one got through yesterday. The state needs to basically replace their computer system, the enterprise resource planning, so everything how all the accounting and everything's done within state government. That's actually a $70 million project. And so that I think has passed through. Jail Improvement Fund for local jails and juvenile facilities, $50 million is sitting out there. Also the system that you go into to get your licenses for your vehicles, that needed a major upgrade. Believe it or not, that's $25 million to get that system replaced. And it's really on its last leg. They've really been having some problems with it. Let's see some other ones here. Trying to go through some of the major ones or ones of interest here. I know we also are looking at $3 million for the bioprocessing facility that's on the research park. That's still in play. I think those are the major ones that would be of interest here. The other thing then, when we go into the actual G bill or the budget for next year. The House has shot over to us or sent over to us the reduction of sales tax, not food, but the full sales tax. And right now, that's down to 4.2%. Today you pay 4.5%. And that would be a decrease in the revenue of $104 million. And so we're taking a look at, what can we fit in? And the Senate's going to be looking a bit more. The House has basically said they want the full down to 4.2%. Where in the Senate right now we're talking about what are our priorities and how much can we really afford. I think one thing that's of interest is, of course, going from 5 to 6% on what we call the big three. So that would be for state employees, Medicaid reimbursement, and education. And also, we're taking a look at what would it cost for a tuition freeze. And that would be for our tech schools and our colleges to have a freeze there. That would cost anywhere from 11 to, if we go up to the 6%, $13 million. But that would hold everybody that's going to college, their tuition would not go up. Something else that's being looked at that's quite expensive, but I think needs to be considered is for our community service providers. And like for here in Brookings, that'd be Advanced. We're talking about what it would take to get them to 100% methodology. And that's a long story what methodology means, but basically it's fully funding. It's fully funding them, and that could cost up to $30 million. And so you can see all the decisions that we're going to have to make here over the next couple of weeks of, how do we want to, where are we going to spend our money, what's our priorities, and how does that affect it with the tax cut that everybody's looking at. Just one other thing that we'll be talking about next 2 weeks too is what are we going to study over the interim. The ones that I'm hearing about are child care. We know we have a child care crisis in the state. Long-term care, as you know, some nursing homes that have been closing down. What can we do to make sure that doesn't continue? And I've heard about county funding has been one. There might be some others that the representatives know about too. But those things will be decided here in the next couple of weeks also, what studies that we think we should make over the summer. So with that, I'll turn it over to the representatives.
Excellent. Thank you, Senator Reed. Melissa Harriman, we will start with you.
Thank you. I would like to thank the Chamber for putting the event on and also the Public Affairs Committee. Just appreciate this opportunity and really hoping to hear from you as well. So if you have something afterwards you want to comment on, please do stay. Really would like to hear your thoughts on some things that are coming up also. As a first-time legislator, it's been quite the learning curve. I have appreciated all the phone a friends where I've been able to reach out to people the day before or sometimes the day of and be able to ask some questions. I've gotten to have brand new first-time conversations with lots of individuals throughout our community in Aurora in order to get a better idea before we ended up getting to a vote on the floor or in committee, so I've appreciated that. So far, when I was campaigning, I talked a lot about youth mental health, and I was really excited to be able to support a number of bills along those lines. Of course, they're still in process. They will be crossing over, and the Senate will be able to take a look at those. But I'm very excited to see where that goes and very hopeful that we will be able to do something significant, maybe a couple of significant things this year that will help support our youth mental health crisis. I know last session there was an investment in mental health more focused on adults, and so I think it's really important that we are able to take that time and focus on our youth as well that are going through a similar crisis. A lot of discussion around taxes, as Tim alluded to, and overall, I've appreciated the opportunities when people have been able to come to Peer and talk through the different situations. So make sure to let us know if you do come to Peer. It is really a joy to have someone from home to be able to connect with when we're out there. And it gives us an opportunity, a unique opportunity before we go to vote to understand where you're at on an issue. Getting a lot of emails and communication. Thank you for that. Please make sure that you're marking that you're from District 7 in your emails. It helps us to sort out if that's a national initiative or if it's a local state concern that's being brought forward. So please continue to do that when you're emailing and corresponding with us. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative DeGroot.
Well, good morning, folks. glad to see you made it out on a brisk, bright, sunny, non-snowing day. Uh, like Representative Heerman said, it's been a heck of a learning curve. It's, I think both of us, we have a mentor, which that helped us a great deal, and he's been helping us, through the session. I think both the representative and I have started to take a little bit more leadership in our committees. I'm on taxation and education, and the good representative I also sit on education together, and we've passed some good bills through there, and we've killed some what I consider bad bills, and we both have taken, I think, a leadership role in that. I sit on education and taxation. I should say, first of all, me too. That's a term I used. Everything they said, I agree with. I mean, Tim and Melissa did a great job with that. But anyway, we're 7 weeks into a 9-week session, 2 weeks to go, and our leaders, they've been so great. They've been positive. They've been keeping us positive, and I noticed a shift though a little bit this week as crunch time comes. Melissa reminded me the other day that you should flirt with a bill, not marry a bill. And some people marry a bill, and when they do, when it goes down, they're really hurt by it. A little more friction, I think, a little bit more anxiety in the House, on the House side. But I want to just say what Tim said. It's been a real positive go. I mean, I understand that in the past it hasn't been so positive, but boy, it's just been great. Even in the Republican Party, there are people in the middle and there are people on the right, and there's a very wide range of folks in the Republican Party. Only 7 Democrats in the House. But we're all getting along fine. I mean, we work together. We disagree on items, but as far as personally, we've kept that out of it. So, and I think we've elected some people like Melissa and I in that are the kind of people that will bridge what's out there. And it's just been working real well, I think. Couple bills I just want to talk about that I think are good for Brookings, not the statewide bills, because the rubber's going to hit the road. And I know the good senator over here was on appropriation, and never be on appropriation because it's like being in jail. They go to work at 7 o'clock or 7:30 in the morning, and we don't see them till caucus time, and then in the evening they'll go back and work. But anyway, so that all needs to be sorted out this week. But 2 weeks ago, I mentioned the Opportunity Scholarship, and I won't go into all that, what that is, but that was increased this year by $1,000, and that's really good for SDSU. A bill I mentioned a couple of weeks ago is Senate Bill 41 that freed up $200 million for infrastructure throughout the state. That's great, and maybe later on I'll have Tim talk about this one. It's the BIT, and I'll just briefly say what it is, and then he can tell you what BIT actually stands for, because I think he's a sponsor of that bill. But it increases the fee that if you're coming through and staying in a motel here in Brookings, it increases the fee from, it can increase the fee. It's $2 now. It can increase it to 4 or 4%, whatever the institution wants. Again, I think he can elaborate on that. A bill that went through this week that I'm really excited about, and Tim mentioned it, House Bill 1030, and I see our good friend Dr. Daniels back there. He showed me through the bio lab last weekend, bioproducts lab facility, and that last year or 2 years ago, there were $20 million allocated for that facility, and we increased it to by $3 million, and so now they can finish that lab completely. If you haven't seen that lab, you have to go see it. It's basically starting with an idea, and by the time it's big enough, they can actually mass produce the product at the end. And they just rent the space. And what I learned last weekend is that the other facilities in the United States are full. So as soon as we have this thing up and running, we have people waiting to rent our space. And so that's how they're going to make money with that lab. One bill that will be coming, it's gone through the Senate, and I think it's gone through Senator Prope already. But we have a facility in town called Teen Challenge, and it's really directed by the judicial system. They send young men there to try to deal with issues so they don't reoffend alcoholism, etc. It's a very successful program. I'm actually the sponsor on the House side with that one. We're trying to increase the payment to that organization from $30 to $50, and I don't think that thing's going to have any problem coming through the House at all. I passed a small little truancy law, House Bill 1191, that basically said that the public schools are only responsible for truancy for kids that are in their school. Otherwise, it's been a good go. 2 weeks ago, and it's going to be, I think a couple of days are going to be long, but I think there's going to be some sitting around time, too, waiting for approps to get things put into the right slot so we can vote on them. Anyway, thanks again for being here.
With that opening, you are never going to be placed on approps. You called them inmates. You complained about how long they make you wait. You are never going to get a seat on approps, sir. Our first question is about House Bill 1200. Requires a percentage of signatures on a petition to initiate a constitutional amendment to be obtained from each legislative district. It has passed the House, and it's headed to Senate State Affairs. Because it passed the House, we will start with Representative Harriman.
Thank you. Yeah, HB 1200 did go through the House. I voted against this bill. I heard a lot of requests from our district that it would make it really challenging in order to make these petitions work. And so I ended up voting against it, but was outvoted, and it did continue to move forward. So, Roger?
Representative DeGroot.
I voted against it as well. It seemed like it might be a little unworkable, and I voted against it as well. It seemed a little unworkable, and after listening to testimony, and some of these decisions are made, we investigate what we can, but we wait for testimony, and the testimony was, I thought, favored a no vote.
This I had to go back in time for my first year. It's actually my first interim in the House, and then Speaker Mickelson put me on a task force that was put together to study the initiated measure and amendment process that we have. Through that process, we thought we had some what we thought were good ideas that we put forth. Some of them we actually went to the ballot. Some of them were more ideas that the legislature themselves could deal with, and they all failed because the people don't want us messing with this process. I've learned that over and over. Look what happened. They wanted to change. The legislature put forth to change the percentage of voters you'd need to increase spending or increase taxes, and that failed. The people didn't want to change there. And so through this process here too, I think the people have been telling us, leave that process alone. That's our process. That's a process that South Dakota actually leads in, the ability for people to put measures on the ballot. And so I will be voting against this when it comes through because people have continued to speak. It's the same reason, and I don't know if we'll talk about Medicaid, but here we are messing with what the citizens put on the ballot one-handedly, and then the legislature all of a sudden wants to start making changes to it. And so I just don't think we should be changing this process.
Thank you. Switching gears, House Bill 1116. Got a couple of questions, and so I think the cleanest way to ask the question, this is the prohibit the use of state resources in hosting lewd or lascivious content. And my joke about this is if you can't say lascivious, you can't talk about this topic. But if you, I think the easiest way maybe to ask this question is just what is your position on this bill? And Senator Reed, we'll start with you.
Thank you. This bill will be coming up next, I think it's Tuesday, that I'll be dealing with it in House Education. I'm leaning no on it. Several reasons. The first is, I was told by a proponent of it, a legislator proponent of it, about how it had nothing to do with drag shows. And then get done with that, and on Twitter, so another that same group, another proponent, is talking about how this is exactly for drag shows. And so that's a little frustrating. What is this really about? What are they trying to accomplish? The last statement, the last section 3 in this bill, goes back and is changing what was put in, 3-4 years ago that had to do with intellectual diversity. And it was the whole idea of protecting people's free speech on our campuses. And in this case, we're going to add Board of Technical Education, which really should be done. And I remember voting against that and thinking to myself when it passed, Well, they'll be back because there's some change that they're going to want to make to that. Intellectual diversity is great until I disagree with it, and that's a problem. So right there at the bottom, they put into that section, nothing in this section prevents the Board of Regents or the Board of Technical Education or any institution under their control from restricting or prohibiting the presence of, well, that's the minor part of it. But basically, we're going back and changing this. I get the minor portion of it, and I think the universities need to figure out whether or not minors should be allowed in events. I know when I grew up here, I was at a lot of events up in college. There were probably more geeky things like computers and such that I'd go up there and listen and learn about. But right away now, all of a sudden, we're changing what is intellectual diversity. And I think that either we're going to say intellectual diversity is good, discussion is good, and you need to be able to express yourself, or we're not. And the other thing we don't want this to do is interfere with the arts. And so those are my concerns with it. So I'm leaning towards no, still taking a look at it and listening to everybody about it.
Representative DeGroot.
I voted for the bill, and everything he said is exactly how I feel. And the term that lewd and lascivious, that is defined in the I think by the Supreme Court, and it's quite distinctive what it means. As I look at this, everybody that stood up and talked about this, they said I haven't seen it. Had a drag queen show, and I don't consider that in this category, but I believe that most everybody else would consider that as a violation of this bill. It all boils down to what happened at SDSU about 4 months ago, and that was the author, the sponsor of this bill, put this thing together. We need to keep the arts protected 100%. Minors, 18-year-old kids should be able to make a decision what they want to go to and see. And the bill might go a little bit too far. Are you saying the Senate might change it or amend it, or?
I don't know if there's any plans. I really don't know how it'll fare in the Senate.
Okay. Anyway, I voted for the bill.
Representative Herman.
I also voted for this bill. I was not in favor of the original bill that was put out. There were a number of amendments to the bill, making it a little bit more general as far as when we're talking about, first of all, the bill was talking about using taxpayer dollars on these type of events. And in talking with different people at SDSU and the student organization, they were utilizing their own organizational fees to pay for the room and the space. So there's a lot of conversations about taxpayer dollars being used. And I think that the taxpayer dollar being used can only go back to maybe lighting of the room, heating and cooling the space itself. But otherwise, the event was paid for through student organizational fees. So after this bill was amended for use of state resources, it was much more broad, and it speaks to lewd, lascivious content, meaning obscene live content, conduct, any specific sexual activity, nude or semi-nude adults, and it goes on to a number of different definitions, including a new word for me, prurient interest, and that really speaks to some things that are more egregious in nature. And so the bill is talking about having these type of events on a college campus. And so when we talked through that specifically, understanding that we have other locations in town that the events could be held at, I did end up voting yes for this bill.
Thank you all very much. We're going to switch gears, and we're going to use House Bill 1137 as kind of our base for this, but I got a couple of questions about taxes. And so how will the proposed reduction in taxes, in the sales tax, and then another question about how will the proposed reduction in property taxes affect things? And so it's kind of a wide-ranging tax question, but those two topics seem to be of interest. So we will start with Representative DeGroot.
Well, many bills came through taxation that was dealing with tax cuts. I'll try to get closer. Many bills came through taxation dealing with tax cuts. And the biggest ones, of course, are the sales tax cut, sales and use tax, and that ranged at right now it's 4.5%, and we looked at it, taking it all the way down to 4%. The Representative Carr is the author of that bill, and then property tax that started as it was a complicated bill. It started as reduce $100,000 off your home for school taxes only. That was revised to reduce property taxes by $300. And then the grocery tax bill, that was reducing it down to 0. We looked at one that reduced it to 3.5%, 2.5%. Not all of those went through taxation. They didn't make it to the appropriation. What happens, folks, is all these taxation bills come to our committee, and we basically pass them all on to appropriation. And then the House approp go to their caucus, and the Senate appropriation go to their caucus and get a feel for that. Most of these bills cut about the same amount of money per person. And I hope I get this right, because anyway, the property tax is $300. So if there's two of you, that's $150 a year apiece. The sales tax, that's about $100, maybe a little bit. And these are really rough numbers because people are just trying to figure this out as thing goes through. But it's about $100 a person. So if you have 2 people, it's a $200 tax cut. If it's 5 people, it's $500 tax cut. And then the grocery tax, that's a what, $1.12 million?
No, I think the grocery tax was also 104.
104. Okay.
104,000. What it was per person, I don't know.
Yeah, they all reduced the amount of money about the same, except for the property tax that was less. So, you want me to expand on any more of these, or you just want maybe we just play off each other as we talk about these bills?
Go for it.
Oh.
Senator Reed, you seem to be itching to discuss this.
Talk about it. So you think about, you got 3 options that were put forth. As Representative DeGroot talked about, you've got the overall sales tax reduction, and then versus the food tax reduction. When you reduce food tax, you have a more narrow scope of what you're taxing. And if we do have, and we're probably heading that way, into a downturn in the economy, people will focus their money more on food. You don't have the extra money to buy some other things. So what that can cause to happen during a downturn is for you to have much less revenue coming into the state. And so I think that's what's being looked at. If you lower the overall sales tax, then it's spread out more. And if there is a downturn, then your food tax is still making up for some of your revenue. I think that was some of the things that were really talked about during the debate. Not necessarily the debate in the room, but there's 105 legislators that are always talking about this continuously. It's amazing if you could just walk around with a legislator and listen to the conversations that you're having about this. And then there was the third option that Dr. DeGroot talked about, which had to do with property taxes. I think property taxes are always a concern of those of us who own property, because we see how much our property taxes are. That reduction would have only been for a homeowner. And so there you're not affecting as many people with the tax cut. And I think so as everybody took a look at all 3 of those, that's why we landed on the overall tax reduction. Plus now it's when you lower it, it's easy. It just takes a majority to lower it. It takes 2/3 to raise it. So now the question is, how much can we really afford with those taxes? And I talked about that earlier in the opening. How much can we really afford? Now we're talking about, what's our priorities? And everybody has different priorities. Increasing the big 3. I talked about that. Can we hold tuition flat? What about the providers of the services like I talk about for advance? What about our nursing homes? And the way that they're funded, through Medicaid. And so now it comes down to what's our priorities versus that tax cut that's hanging out there. And that's the negotiations that are going to happen with this. But I think that's what happened with the 3. I actually feel they landed in probably the best spot, especially using my economics background. I think that's the best way of taxing people.
So that hasn't gone through the Senate yet, has it?
No. So now, let's see. So now what happens is that tax bill will sit over on our side probably to the last couple days. And as appropriations is working through the general bill, that has to come together at the same time to be voted on. So that's how that'll come together. So you're not going to hear anything about voting on that sales tax, but just realize over the next week and a half, that's when there'll be a lot of negotiations on the spending priorities and balancing the budget.
Can I just wrap this up? And or, go ahead, Representative Hiramy.
I've lost control.
No, I'm
with
sorry.
permission.
I'm a control freak, so go.
One other thing I was going to note on the sales tax reduction, the proposal also repeals a Partridge Amendment that was included in the sales tax increase in 2016. This required the state to reduce the sales tax rate if it ever were able to collect sales and those online tax sales. So this does a couple of different things. We're able to kind of follow the law there and be able to reduce that down. I've had a lot of questions about just our economy overall, and there's been a lot of numbers that have thrown out and changed a little throughout the session as we've talked about it. So right now we feel the economy is strong. So from 2010 to 2022, the average sales tax growth rate was 4.3%. When inflation and the federal stimulus dollars were not considered. So they took those outlier years, they pulled them out to see what the average was, and then we're able to see there is organic economic growth that is occurring within the state. That was helpful for me to be able to see before we started talking about some of these tax cuts, because the question I've been hearing more regularly is not which of the three proposals should we do. They all have merit. The question is, should we do a tax reduction at all? And so far, all the indicators that we're looking at for the economy is that it is strong, and this would be a good time to take some of the taxpayer dollars and put them back into the pockets of our taxpayers.
I just want, she said it all. I mean, we are so fortunate.
Closer.
We are so fortunate in this state because of the sales and use tax has grown so rapidly, and our economy is extremely strong. And I don't even want to go into the debate. There's some debate out there that the numbers aren't right, and we're going to be in trouble. But I actually had an opportunity to be in the governor's office last week, and is Jason Twilliger, the analyzer for the governor, is extremely proud of his numbers, and he's extremely confident they'll stay. One thing I want to say, whatever tax cut we do, they negotiate, it will be the largest one ever in South Dakota. Maybe not percentage-wise, but dollar-wise, it's going to be the largest. It's going to. I'm guessing that this tax cut's going to be pretty close to $104 million going back to the people. Unfortunately, that's a lot of money that we'll lose from the state. It's around, like I say, 104. But when it gets back to you folks, it just seems like such a little bit. I mean, when you go to the grocery store and you're saving 0.3% of a penny, on a dollar, it doesn't seem like much, but it is a huge tax cut, and I'm really proud to be a part of that. And I'm going to be interested to see what the Senate and the House actually can negotiate, because they're holding their cards real close to their vest. I'm learning as I go, and Mr. Reed is smiling because he's been through the process many times.
Next topic has to do with what I would say is eminent domain, and we've used House Bill 1224 as our guide. This is a bill that has been deferred to the 41st legislative day by House of State Affairs. But how do you weigh property rights versus business rights? Representative Harriman, we'll start with you.
So this was a difficult one for me. We talked a lot about this bill, and the bill that went through the House was more about categorizing whether carbon was a commodity or not. When we were talking through this bill, and I don't remember the bill number that we worked through in the House, if you voted for it, you were voting for landowner rights, which I have almost always fallen on that side, right? And then a vote against it was more in line with economic development and support of our local ethanol plant right here in Aurora. Some of the concerns are with the federal regulations that will be coming down, that the ethanol plant in Aurora will need the ability to offload a percentage of its carbon in a different way. And without that pipeline, they may actually be restricted in their ability to continue business. And we know that ethanol supports our agriculture as an industry in South Dakota. So this was a really difficult one for me. I reached out, I phoned a friend to a number of different people in Aurora and Brookings. At the end of the day, I voted red on the bill, which was changing the category of whether carbon was a commodity, and that red was indicating I was supporting the economic development piece and supporting our ethanol plant in Aurora. But I believe I was outvoted on this one, and it did pass through.
I think you're referring to House Bill 1133. So if that's a better guide for this question, I'm not surprised that I was wrong. Senator Reed.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just the general topic is of interest. Just kind of piggybacking on what Representative Herman said, the 65%, I think this was the major argument, and it did end up dying in Senate Commerce. 65% of our corn goes to the ethanol plants. And I think there was a fear overall is if we couldn't do this, that the bottom would fall out of that market. And I think that in the end of the day is what won out. I think that's what the bill, as she said, was really about whether or not CO2 was a commodity. And that's how it's always, anytime you use eminent domain, you're usually putting in a roadway or maybe an airport. And then, of course, fuel pipelines, gas pipelines. And there the exact question of the bill is, you're moving commodities, right? This is important to the economy. If you can't move product, you don't have an economy. And moving oil and such, or gas and ethanol and such, there's a danger moving it on rail tracks too. And so what's the best way of doing this? And I think that's a lot of the times where where people, when they look at eminent domain, they get upset about it. But if you don't do it, then, you don't have your economy. You don't have your capitalistic economy working. And so I think that was the discussion in the end. And again, come back to how much corn is consumed by these ethanol plants. And there was a big fear that market would drop out. And being our number one industry, ag being our number one industry, I think there was a lot of concern with that.
Representative DeGroot.
I was fortunate. I was having some eye issues, and I was at an eye doctor on this day of the debate, and I didn't have an opportunity to actually vote on it, but I was actually at home, and I watched it unfold, and I really don't have a whole lot to add. And I think if you boil it down to it, it's property rights versus kind of big business. But if you side with the property rights and they can't put their pipeline in, there's a fear out there that businesses won't come here. When I go to Pierre every week, and Melissa too, right outside of the Smith, there's a jet fuel plant going to go in there, similar to ethanol. And the lobbyist for that told me that if we don't get this pipeline in and get rid of our carbon, we're not going to come here, we're going to go someplace else. And I talked to Representative Mills. Actually, we were at another meeting last Saturday, and he said that might not be entirely true. So sometimes we make decisions based on what we hear. But anyway, I have a nephew that is ethanol CEO at Marion, and he's not in favor of this actually. But the reason they want to do this because there's green states out there, Minnesota going to be, I believe, California, and they pay a premium for the ethanol where the carbon is taken off. And so it's a greener product. They get more money for it. But then my question is, if everybody goes green and pumps their carbon off, then the prices are going to be the same for everybody, and there's not going to be that cost saving. So it's really an emotional issue. There's been a lot of people. Probably this is the bill that had the most people, the most lobbyists out of all of them.
Thank you very much. I don't have a bill number for this, but a couple of questions. And I'll just remind you, we are kind of coming toward the end of time. So if you do have a question, Now is your last call, I guess, for questions. So what rules are in place to ensure that proper decorum is maintained in the legislature? And Senator Reed, we'll start with you because you have the most experience. You're welcome.
Well, let's just say I've gained experience through the years. Not that I have the most experience. So I think the thing to realize, I'm going to go kind of way back to the top, the three branches of government, right? There are three branches of government. The legislature is one of those branches. I think a lot of this, well, probably the question stems from the situation that occurred with Senator Freidmuller. I also know there's been I've received several emails that there was some complaints against Senator Schoenbeck in comments that he made in the committee meetings. And so when it comes to the rules for decorum, I mean, there's just one simple rule in our red book. That's our rule book. You'll see us carrying it around sometime. It just says we have to have proper decorum. What does that mean? That puts it back on the body. The body is responsible for itself. The body seats its members at any time. And this goes for sort of city councils. I'm not sure how it works with school boards, but most bodies, you seat your members. And at any time, usually through a higher majority of the members, you can kick a person out. You can say you're not qualified. When you come up and all this stuff has been proven that you've won an election, there still can be reasons that the body doesn't seat you. And so it's really up to the body, what is that level of decorum? And if the body gets upset with something to a great enough degree, then they can do such things as censuring somebody. Or you can go all the way to kick somebody out. And it's really the rules, there really is no specific rule that says, well, you can't do this, you can't do this. You got to fall within the First Amendment. That's something you got to make sure that everybody can be able to say what they want to say. You can't tell somebody that you can't say this or you can't say that. But you need to act within reason, and be reasonable and polite is what I'd say decorum is. So I don't know if I quite answered your question, but you understand where the rules would come from. But there is no specific rule that says you can't say this or you can say this. It just says that we need to have decorum. If you don't have decorum, the body can do something about it.
Representative Harriman.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I would just add, there are ways in committee also. So the chair is responsible for ensuring that decorum happens during the committee. So we had an example in the Health and Human Services committee where, you'll put a bill out there and people will sign up to testify from potentially all over the United States. So you don't necessarily know who's going to be voting or speaking for or against the bill in front of you. In this case, the testifier was not known to anybody in the room, but they took a lot of leeway with decorum. They were an online testifier. They ended up getting, after they said the R word and a lot of other things in quick succession, they ended up getting gavelled down, and then we ended up having to shut down the feed because it was getting a little bit out of control. So our committee chair also is responsible for ensuring that decorum is kept and that all of our testifiers are having the respect that they deserve, but also the people in the room are having the respect that they deserve. So that was another thing that I've seen so far. And then within our caucus, we also have sort of policies in place if there's a breach of decorum, where that's kind of brought to light for all of the members. And we talk through what kind of behavior should and shouldn't happen there as well.
Representative DeGroot, anything to add?
There is a lot of decorum out there. Every time you ask a question, you have to go through the chair. Every time you ask a question, you have to go through the chair. Every time you want to be recognized on the floor, you have to give Mr. Speaker, and then he has to recognize. If you ask a question, that's the basic decorum that we're talking about. I can't speak on the Senate side. Tim said that they police themselves, and there's three branches. Well, there are three branches, but actually the House and the Senate are completely separate in their caucuses. So we are staying completely out of what's going on in the Senate because we are pretty fortunate this year. We haven't had any major breaks. We've had some decorum issues, and our leader dealt with them within the caucus. my email box has been completely filled over the last week and a half over that issue that supposedly happened in House Affairs on the 15th of February. But our leader, Mortensen, he says, the less we know, the better we're off. And he said it's not his business. I won't go there. They're separate. The House deals with their problems, and the Senate deals with their problems.
Senator Reed.
I just wanted to add, and Representative Heuermann made a really good remark on that, and it's true, and it is up to the chair, and then it's up to the presiding officer of the body. And if you ever notice, and this was here, I probably should have started this out by doing that. You'd not believe what that means, and that's why a committee. That's why he has a big hammer. Both houses have big hammers, and you get out of line, and especially with Lieutenant Governor Roden, he throws it down pretty quickly if you get out of line. And that's what you have to do, and that's what should happen. Maybe it should be happening more. I'm not sure, but you got to use it early to set it up so you don't get kind of out of control. I had to do that in my first local government meeting. Nothing real big, but it was still stop. We're not going to do this, and you set that tone early, and that's how you actually keep good decorum.
I appreciate everyone's decorum here this morning. House Bill 1080, passage of, has to do with puberty blockers, trans issues, and so I will ask passage, what will be the future impacts of passage of 1080? And we will start, we don't have it up, sorry. That was on me, I did not give advance warning to Kelsey. Representative Harriman, we'll start with you. Senator Reed, you ready? Okay, go ahead.
So the question was, what are the future impacts?
Yes. What will be the future impacts of passage of 1080?
I was actually going to ask Senator Reed about the rules review portion because I haven't been through that next after a bill passes. If the next step is through a rules process.
Well, I don't think there's rules that have to go along with this one. Whoops, I'm not on the right bill. So I think the question more is how I'm understanding the question more is how do we think this is going to affect? And I had concerns.
Correct.
Pardon? How is as this bill goes forward? Well, here's the first thing: it's going to go to court. It's going to go to court. The 8th Circuit has already ruled against a like bill, and so there's a good chance that this will be stayed. I can't think of the right term, injunction on it, and so it probably will not go into effect, especially since it's already, and it's the same circuit that we're in the 8th Circuit, by the way, and so I think that's the first thing. Otherwise, there is concerns. I have concerns on what could happen. We're working on suicide prevention, and I think that's one of the biggest concerns here. We've got a bill out there. It's House Bill 1079. We're trying to funnel's not a good term. Put money towards mental health care for the younger generation, and it was at $4 million. It's been cut back to $2 million. I'm just happy it's still alive, and I think that is something that we got to continue to focus on. Is really suicide prevention and what kind of help we can have out there as we work through this issue.
Representative DeGroot.
I don't really have much to add. All I wanted, just a few things. And we just got into this part in the session, but there's several folks out here that really want us to work on mental health, and we are going to work on mental health. I sat in appropriation the other day and listened to some testimony on suicide, and I was just shocked at what's going on with our young kids. It's leading cause of death in young people, and hopefully we can put money into suicide prevention, into mental health, and work with it through that path.
Did you have anything to add, Representative Harriman?
Yeah, I was just going to add. There's been a couple of different mental health bills that have come through Health and Human Services, and I've been on support of, and also have signed on as far as co-sponsoring. And just some of their arguments were, suicide ages from 15 to 24, 29.6 out of 100,000. Ages 25 to 34 is 7 out of 100,000. So there's just a lot of data supporting that that's where we want to put our effort. And so in light of 1080, I know that was a large concern going into it. And I think in response to that, there has been a number of mental health bills that we've put a lot of support and focus on. So I think those two will go together. If you have 1080, then you need to also throw your support behind mental health. And that's why, that was one of my first comments starting today, that I support 100%. I've talked to a lot of people about youth mental health and just said I'm all in. So, the bills that are coming, I'm in support of.
Senator Reed.
Just one thing to add on 1079, and this I think is extremely positive. This came from that age group. This is coming from our colleges. We had a group that came to us and has proposed this bill. They've been out there. The Student Federation from the university has been out there fighting for this bill. I'm just happy it's still alive. We did lose one bill that came out of the Juvenile Justice Committee, and that was to create a $20 million scholarship fund for attracting our young people to go into mental health professions. And we did lose that one. I don't know if nothing's ever dead until the last day in the legislature. I'll comment about a few of those things that I think are coming up here maybe at the end. But, so I'd like to see that one still come back, but I think it just fell out in the priorities. It's sad to say it's easier to bring home a project, when you're done. It's easier to bring home a water project or making sure that, this building got done when it was something that just isn't as tangible and able for people to see. And so we just got to continue fighting for it.
Thank you. As we kind of come to the end of our time, I have a question here that I'd like you to wrap into your kind of closing statement. And it's the question is, what bills are each of you carrying? So if that's if you want to update on where they're at in the process, but I think it would be helpful for folks to know if we can do that as part of our closing statement. And Representative DeGroot, we will start with you.
Well, once again, folks, thanks for coming out. The next 2 weeks we're going to be dealing with spending, and I was asked to rate how it, 1, 2, and 3 on the spending bills, and I went school funding 1 plus, Medicare 1, freezing tuition for SDSU 1, and then mental health as well. That's on top of that. And then they want to know if we should put money aside for the increase in the Medicaid expansion. And I really don't have an opinion on that yet. It seems like we have a lot of ongoing revenues coming in, so I'm not sure we need to put money aside for that. But there's some thoughts that in 2 years we'll have a substantial, well, it's not some thoughts, we will have a substantial increase in Medicaid costs due to the passing of the amendment. And the two bills, I talked about them early on, two real easy ones. I look at Tim's bill list, and it's real long. Mine's small, and it was actually recommended to me the first year to get your feet wet, get on the feet on the ground. But just the truancy bill, and then the teen challenge bill where we'll increase the tuition.
Representative Harriman.
Yes, thank you. So just to wrap up, some things that we've seen a lot of here at the tail end in Health and Human Services, we've spent a lot of time on marijuana, which was not something I expected to have quite this many bills, seeing as there was such a focus on it last year. But there have been a couple of things that have popped up that required some additional attention. And so we did spend a lot of time on that. The House did move through a bill. I don't have the bill number, but it passed to tighten up absentee voting drop boxes, and a bill that guaranteed vote counting machines are sound and untampered with. So we have put some focus on election integrity. I know I've heard a lot of questions and thoughts about that from our district as well. And then to talk through some of the bills I'm carrying, I'll talk through first a cremation bill. And I had a friend reach out to me and say, I didn't realize cremation was your passion. And that's fair. So I am learning about a lot of different subjects and topics in the legislature. It's been a great experience for me. I was approached by Senator Davis to see if I would carry a cremation bill over on the House floor. And so I am doing that, and it's essentially an update to a bill, but it's a significant update. It hasn't been touched for a really long time. The funeral directors and others are asking for this update, and so it removes some old-timey language about telegraphs and telegrams, and it's bringing it into the current day situation for cremation. But a bill I do want to talk to you about that I'm really excited about is HB 1231. This is a bill that came out of our region, and it is related to adoption records. So over the U.S., there is sort of a movement to open up information about adoption records for adoptees. This bill will allow an adoptee, once they turn 18, to gain access to their original birth certificate. So when you're talking about adoption records, there's the court proceedings, there's the whole adoption record packet. We are talking simply about their original birth certificate. It has information like the time of their birth, the hospital, the parents' original birth parent names. What we found is with Ancestry.com and 23andMe, all these other DNA matching services that are out there, people are finding their family, long-lost relatives, their parents, and finding out their heritage without a court order anyhow. A lot of the adoption services that I've talked to have shared that most adoptions are open. So one of the organizations I reached out to said in the last 2 years they'd had maybe 5 requests for a closed adoption. And out of those 5, all of them agreed that once the adoptee turned 18, they could have access to their names. So there's just this change in attitude and culture about adoption. Whereas in the far distant past, there may have been more of a stigma around it. Now that isn't present anymore. And the adoptees are asking to be connected to their heritage and to understand where they came from and that last piece to their puzzle. And so I'm very proud to be able to carry this bill. I think it's really good legislation. It has passed House committee and the floor, and it will be coming in front of Senate committee with Senator Reed on Monday morning. So I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. I have around 6 or 7 organizations nationally that are supporting the effort, and to date we've had no opposition. So I'm very excited about that bill.
Senator Reed.
There's something between legislators, just 2 words that kind of mean a lot, and that's good bill. And thank you, Melissa, for putting me on that bill, asking me to carry it in the Senate. It has been, we went to the first committee hearing for it, and it was fascinating to listen to how this is all changing, and I'm real excited about carrying it on the Senate side and look forward to helping you with it in Health and Human Services in the Senate. I've got quite a few bills. No wonder why I'm tired when I get home. Just a few of them that are exciting and moving through well. Representative DeGroot talked about House Bill 1109. That's the ability for a community that has a bid district. A bid district, basically, in this example, is all the hotels. And there's an occupancy tax that's charged every night. In Brookings, that's $2. That started 17 years ago and has never changed. And so we have got it through both chambers. We'll see if the governor signs it, that you can go up to $4 or you can change it to a percentage. So that's good for the visitor industry and has a few other things that I think that'll help with it. A couple other bills that I think that I'm carrying. I'm sorry, I got to look at it. One that I'm excited about is Senate Bill 70. This gives protections to children when they're facing their perpetrator in court. If a child has been sexually assaulted, it gives some tools to use to help that child in the testimony. I also have Senate Bills 90 and 91. They go together. They're sexual assault bills, has to do with rape. It puts the term consent into rape bills, and the whole idea is you have to have consent for sex, and it adds a A bill, basically it says that sex without consent is a felony. In the law today, if one person was saying no the whole time, it would not be considered rape. And that's what this bill changes. Also excited about I was on the, even though we tabled it, we're still going to go forward with it, is the interim study for child care. I think those are some of the major ones that I'm working on. And one I did have to table, and that was my grooming bill. I think everybody's aware of what the Koskin situation. And today in law, grooming is not illegal. You actually have to go through the sexual assault on the child before it becomes something that's illegal. Now, I'd like to change that. But the issue is, it's hard because, people come back and say, well, what was their true intent? Was their intent really, and if they never really did have sex with the child, and so that's one issue that was, especially with the defense lawyers, they didn't like that. And the other part of it that's tough is you use grooming to prove the case. And if we start defining exactly what grooming is, then in the court case, they sometimes can't use some of the things that adult may have used to groom that child to have sex with them. And so it's a really tough one. I hope to get back on it next year and see what we can do. But this was a good start, got people talking about it. But I did have to table it because it would have caused problems with prosecutions in the future. So it's one you lost, but we'll keep moving on it. We'll see what we can do.
Well, thank you all very much for your service. Thank you all for coming this morning. Thank you to Cool Beans for our sponsor. Thank you to members of the Public Affairs Committee for your assistance this morning. I think all three of you will be around for a little bit, so if people have questions that they would like to talk to individuals about, you are welcome to do that. Thank you so much for coming, and have a great day.